Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
The CIA director has secretly met Mullah Abdul Ghani brother yesterday in Kabul. Can you confirm these reports?
We cannot confirm.
I'm standing at Kabul International Airport.
How much can change in 10 days? Everything. Ask the Afghans. Their country has turned upside down. Ask the Americans. The power equations have reversed. Ask the Taliban. They're holding press conferences. They're dictating terms. No change in the August 31st deadline, they say. Foreign forces must leave by then, the end of this month. And America must discourage Afghans from leaving. The Europeans say that's an impossible deadline to meet. They can't get everyone out by the 31st. Many people will be left behind. All those who worked in foreign missions, who were promised a safe exit from Afghanistan, may not be able to leave. But what do the Americans say? Well, they're ramping up evacuations and they'll try to meet the deadline. The superpower is taking orders. They're also cutting secret deals, it seems. The CIA chief reportedly met Taliban leaders in Kabul yesterday. Neither side has confirmed, even when WION put the question to the Taliban spokesperson at today's press conference. It feels wrong just saying it, a Taliban press conference. This is 2021. A terrorist group, legitimized as a stakeholder, has grabbed power at gunpoint and is dictating terms to the world. What's worse, the world is trying to comply. On Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you all about Afghanistan as we keep telling ourselves. This is not a Netflix series. This is a real story affecting real people. Also on the show tonight, India's army brass confirms what we've been saying for a while now. American weapons in Taliban hands will end up in Kashmir via Pakistan. The concerns are real. Prime Minister Modi talks to Russian President Putin today. In the US, Biden's U-turns and blunders have reached epic proportions. For a man with so many years of foreign policy experience, how did he get it all so wrong? We'll show you his resume, littered with criminal mistakes. How's his predecessor doing? Donald Trump is being booed for recommending vaccines, and the wall that he built on the Mexican border, it's being washed away by rains. Halfway across the world, another president is planning his political future. President Duterte of the Philippines has agreed to run for vice president. We'll tell you why. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
The UN Human Rights Chief has raised grave concerns over the rights abuses under the Taliban, saying the UNHRC has credible reports of summary executions, girls being blocked from attending school, and recruitment of child soldiers. India has expressed concern over Afghanistan becoming a terror haven once again. The Indian representative at the UNHRC has said that terror groups like the Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed must not be allowed to use Afghan soil to spread terror. The United States has imposed sanctions on Eritrea's army chief over human rights abuses in the war-torn region. The move comes amid reports that Eritrea has deployed reinforcements in Tigray amid renewed fighting between Ethiopia's federal fighters and Tigray rebels. Chinese ride-hailing giant Didi Global has suspended its plans to launch in Britain and continental Europe. This comes in the background of regulatory backlash in China over data privacy. The newly elected Prime Minister of Malaysia, Ismail Sabri Yaakob, is expected to unveil his cabinet this week, announcing that the list of new ministers will be released only after it gets approval by the king. Yaakob assumed power after former Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin's government collapsed. New Zealand recorded its highest increase in COVID-19 cases since April 2020, with 41 cases on Tuesday. Most cases were reported from Auckland, New Zealand's largest city. Days after deadly flash floods claimed more than 20 lives in the US state of Tennessee, rescue teams combed through destroyed homes and piles of debris in search of dozens of people believed to be missing. Caldor fire has razed more than 100,000 acres in America's California state. More than 24,000 people have been evacuated in the El Dorado County alone. At least 600 buildings have been reduced to ashes. American Tony Finau has ended a more than 5-year wait for his second PGA Tour title with a playoff victory in the Northern Trust, the first leg of the FedEx Cup playoffs. World number 1 Jon Rahm led by 3 shots at one point during the final round that was delayed by Hurricane Henry, but Finau picked up 4 shots over the last 7 holes to end tied for the lead with Cameron Smith. He then made par on the first playoff hole to take the title and climb to first place in the FedEx Cup standings. The 16th edition of the Summer Paralympic Games are underway with a glittering opening ceremony at Tokyo's National Stadium. The hosts paid homage to the resilience of the approximately 4,400 athletes from over 160 countries who are participating in these games. Javelin thrower Tek Bahadur was the flag bearer of the Indian contingent, while Afghanistan's flag was also at the ceremony in a message of solidarity. The Games will be held without spectators over the next 12 days, with Japan battling record COVID infections.
We're watching a republic perish before our eyes, and along with it, the dreams of 40 million people. The new Islamic Emirate is turning Afghanistan into Taliban country. It's not a democracy, it's not a republic, it's certainly not a welfare state. So what is it? Well, the Taliban won't say. They're keeping the whole world and Afghanistan waiting. Today, the Taliban held press conference number 2. If the first one was a sermon, this one was a victory lap. The spokesperson boasted about perfect law and order. He said there was no crime on the streets. Must be talking about a different Kabul. Because our reports tell another story. Coalition allies are being hunted by the Taliban. Women are being sacked from their jobs without reason. Sounds like fear, not law and order. How long can this continue? Afghanistan is facing a massive refugee crisis. The country will run out of food by September, next month. But the Taliban are in no hurry. They don't see why forming a government is important to govern. The question is, what exactly are the Taliban waiting for? Probably the Americans to leave. Just think about it. They made military plans to topple a government, but forgot to discuss the new regime. It seems unlikely. Once the last American soldier leaves, the new government will be announced. It tells you why the Taliban calls August 31st a red line.
We want them to evacuate all foreign nationals by the 31st of August. And we are not in favor of allowing Afghans to leave.
The first Taliban regime had an emir, sort of like a supreme leader. Back in the 1990s, it was their co-founder, Mullah Omar. Reports say this time there will be no emir. Instead, a council is likely to rule Afghanistan. It will be a 12-member council, we are told. The obvious question is, who makes the cut? Who will be these 12 people? Most of them are likely to be top Taliban leaders. A few docile officials of the ousted government may also be included. But don't mistake this for inclusivity. The Taliban are putting on a show for the global community. If they need diplomatic recognition, they have to fake inclusivity. This 12-member council is not made up of equals. The real power lies with 3 men. Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, the Taliban's co-founder, Mullah Muhammad Yaqub, son of Mullah Omar, and Khalil Haqqani, a senior leader of the Haqqani network, the terror group. These men have been in and out of jails. They have made cameos on foreign terror lists. They're wanted in multiple terrorist investigations. And now they will rule Afghanistan. How many countries will recognize this regime? Well, I can think of three countries who still run their embassies in Kabul: China, Pakistan and Russia. Iran is also a likely candidate. They have resumed oil export to Afghanistan, and that too with a 70% tariff cut from the Taliban. What about Western democracies? They're waiting and watching, but don't underestimate the West's self-serving policies. Reports say CIA Chief William Burns was in Kabul recently. He met Mullah Baradar at the presidential palace. Our correspondent Anas Malik asked the Taliban spokesman about this meeting, and this was the response.
Thank you so much, sir. Anas Malik from WION. A question in English. Today there was a news item in Washington Post quoting sources that the CIA director has secretly met Mullah Abdul Ghani brother yesterday in Kabul. Can you confirm these reports? And if so, what was the purpose of this meeting? Thank you.
Political office has been holding meetings with all embassies present in Kabul, which includes the embassy of the United States. They are here to. They are meeting with them to assure everyone and to maintain diplomatic relations. We will not confirm. We cannot confirm that Mullah Baradar has met with the CIA director.
Trust the Americans to cut secret deals and trust the Taliban to play along. They're certainly pretending to be rulers, but can they lead? Nothing about the Taliban's history suggests that they can. Just look at some of the appointments they've made. On Monday, Haji Mohammad Idris was appointed the acting head of the Afghan Central Bank. His job sounds impossible. A currency at rock bottom, empty ATMs and surging inflation. Can the new central bank head turn it around? Well, the thing is, we don't know. Nobody knows who Haji Mohammad Idris is, where he studied, or what he's achieved so far. Apparently, he handled the Taliban's finances. But we're talking about managing a country's central bank. It's not the same thing. It is the same story with most appointees, in fact. The finance minister, the Kabul governor, the Kabul mayor, the education minister. Can these men handle a country? And more importantly, where are the women? What happened to the promise of women in government in Afghanistan under the Taliban? This will be a huge problem going forward. Afghanistan's technocrats have either fled or are too scared to work. Warlords and local drug mafia cannot replace them. So the Taliban are about to get a rude surprise. They have a country to rule, but they have no idea how to. What we're seeing at the moment is this: chaos, desperation and dead bodies. And we've shown all of this to you. Tonight we'll take you inside the Kabul airport, the symbol of the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. WION is the only network from this part of the world that has managed to get access to the airport, and the pictures are telling. I want to begin by showing you one picture in particular. On your screen is the man who used to lead the Afghan forces. His name is Wali Muhammad Ahmadzai. He was removed when the Taliban took Ghazni. Ahmadzai served as the Afghan army chief for barely a month. Where is he now? He was seen waiting in a line outside the Kabul airport, the Afghan army chief. Just like the thousands of Afghans who are desperate to leave the country. The chaos continues outside the Kabul International Airport. Afghans are still pouring in. More than 16,000 people were evacuated in the last 24 hours, but the crowds are still swelling at the gates. Now look at what's happening inside the airport. Last week, the same tarmac was flooded with hundreds of Afghans. They were running around, desperately trying to board a flight. None of that now. The American forces have taken complete control of the airport alongside their Western allies. They control the entry points. And there are 7 of them at the Kabul airport, 7 entry points. And those who manage to get inside are truly lucky, because even after 8 days, the Western forces have not been able to streamline the evacuation process. There are thousands of Afghans who want to leave the country. Not everyone can get out, though, because it's the Americans who are running the evacuation, and they're only pulling out those Afghans who worked for the US forces, like as translators and interpreters. And even then, there is no guarantee. Afghans cannot just walk into the airport to claim a seat on a flight, even those who fit the US eligibility criteria. They can't just walk in. They first need to apply for a special immigrant visa. Then they must wait for their name to appear on a list, and only then are they allowed inside this heavily fortified airport. Having a visa is no guarantee of entry. They might struggle to get inside, one, because the airport gates are so crowded, and two, because the Taliban don't want them to leave. They're making it harder for Afghans to exit. They're guarding the road leading up to the airport. They're blocking Afghans from reaching the airport gates. Our correspondent Anas Malik was inside the airport today, the Kabul airport, when hundreds of Afghans were boarding an evacuation flight. Here is what he saw.
I'm standing at the military side of the Kabul International Airport. Behind me is the line which is leading towards this aircraft. To my left is the aircraft which is there, and people in numbers, hundreds are leaving today. These are the passengers. 261 are on board of this aircraft. All of them are Afghans in hope, in despair, to flee to a safer destination. They are of the opinion that they're very sad that they never wanted to leave, but they do not have an option to actually live within the country given the Taliban's takeover. They aspire to be back one day to serve their country in a better manner.
The grief of the Afghans was visible. They were relieved to get on a flight, but they were also sad to be leaving their home. It's understandable. It can't be easy for anyone.
My country, this is my homeland, and because of Taliban, the government we want to leave the country.
It is very sad to leave my country, but there was no way without leaving my country, because the situation in Afghanistan is getting worse day by day, and there are a lot of rumors and there are a lot of reports that journalists, media activists, social activists are going to be targeted. I'm leaving my family, my home, my career, my everything behind.
Those voices echo what millions of Afghans are feeling today. They're lucky to have a chance to flee. About 50,000 foreign nationals and Afghans have managed to leave so far, while thousands more are waiting, desperately looking for a way to get inside that airport. And they're not the only ones who are struggling. Governments around the world are struggling to get their citizens out of Afghanistan. Earlier today, a Ukrainian minister made a major claim. He said that one of the Ukrainian evacuation flights was hijacked at gunpoint and flown to Iran. Kiev later denied that this happened. It says the minister was just trying to describe the difficulties faced by the Ukrainian pilots during the evacuation. It's hard to verify who is giving the accurate version now. But it's safe to say that chaos and fear reign supreme. And this is happening when Western forces are running the Kabul airport. Wait till the Taliban take charge. There's no saying what happens then. The West has huddled together to defend itself on Afghanistan. What about Afghanistan's neighbors? Are they looking to put up a coordinated response? Or is it still each country for itself? Let's look at what the developments are telling us. Earlier today, Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, held a telephonic conversation with the President of Russia. This phone call lasted for a good 45 minutes. What did the two leaders discuss in these 45 minutes? A host of things. But of course, the situation in Afghanistan was top priority. It topped their agenda. Both Moscow and New Delhi have been rather tight-lipped about the details of the call. All we have is a tweet by Prime Minister Modi, but it doesn't say very much. The timing of the phone call, though, tells you the story. It comes right after the Russian president rejected the idea of sending Afghan refugees to Central Asian nations, indicating that such a move would be a threat to Moscow. Putin reportedly said, and I'm quoting, "I do not want militants showing up here under the cover of refugees." These are concerns that India shares with Russia, even if unofficially. India is currently undertaking a complex mission to evacuate its citizens and Afghans in danger. This mission is called Operation Devi Shakti. It was launched on the 16th of August. It has led to the evacuation of 800 people so far. This includes Indian citizens, also many Afghan Sikhs, Hindus and Muslims. For India, which took over the presidency of the United Nations Security Council this month, this is a moment to demonstrate its leadership, to rescue Afghans in distress. But India is also mindful of the security concerns as the situation develops. the penetration of the Taliban ideology, the rise in extremism. These are serious worries. The American weapons in Taliban hands also pose a challenge for India. They could make their way to Kashmir via Pakistan. We've been saying this for a while now. Now the Indian Army has confirmed this. Top army officials say that a large number of American weapons captured by the Taliban from the Afghan army could end up in India. And before this happens, these weapons would be used for violence in Pakistan. This is the Indian Army's assessment, that American weapons in Taliban hands would first create, quote-unquote, havoc in Pakistan and then be smuggled into India. Does Pakistan see this threat to its own peace or whatever is left of it? Well, it doesn't. Pakistan is still high on its obsession with Kashmir. It hopes to use the Taliban to take over Kashmir. And this is not a figment of my imagination. This is a quote from a Pakistani lawmaker. They're saying it in so many words, and that too on national television. Neelam Irshad Sheikh is a leader from Imran Khan's party, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. In a television debate, she unabashedly admitted to Pakistan Army's close ties with the Taliban, and she said that the Taliban had promised to help Pakistan capture Kashmir. You have to watch this.
तालिबान हमें कहते हैं हम आपके साथ हैं और इंशाल्लाह वो आके हमारे साथ कश्मीर फतह करके देंगे।
ये किसने आपको कोई व्हाट्सएप आया होगा कि तालिबान आपके साथ मिलकर के कश्मीर आजाद कराएंगे? वाकई ऐसा कोई ख्वाब देखती हैं आप? किसने दिखाया है?
इंशाल्लाह।
ये कैसे, किसने आपको बताया? आपको पता है आपने क्या कहा है?
We can't say if it's a WhatsApp forward, but ever since the Taliban have re-emerged, Pakistan's wishful thinking on Kashmir seems to know no bounds. Meanwhile, pro-Taliban propaganda has intensified. These are images from the Jamia Hafsa Seminary in Islamabad. They recently organized an event to celebrate the Taliban's comeback. This event was attended by children. They were too young to tell right from wrong. And this is what they were made to do: hold placards supporting the Taliban and sing Salam Taliban, a song hailing the Taliban's victory as a victory of Muslims the world over. I must warn you, it's unsettling.
Salam Taliban, Salam Taliban, Salam Taliban, Salam Taliban. Now, we're not sure if that would make the Taliban happy, since they consider music and songs haram or blasphemous. But that's besides the point. The point is, things have gone completely crazy in Pakistan. They're making young girls sing praises to a terror group as women in Afghanistan run for their life. Take the case of Aryana Saeed, one of Afghanistan's most famous singers. She fled Kabul as soon as the Taliban took over. Here's what she has to say now about Pakistan's role in supporting the Taliban. I do blame Pakistan, she says. Over the years, we have seen videos and evidence that Pakistan is behind empowering the Taliban. Every time our government touches the Taliban, they see identification, and it would see a Pakistani person. So it's very obvious that I blame them and hope that they back off and don't interfere in politics in Afghanistan anymore. Back off and don't interfere. Well, these are words that Pakistan has never understood. And now they see the Taliban's rise as their own victory. Speaking of, do you remember the US elections of 2020? Joe Biden won. He was the establishment candidate, the foreign policy veteran, the guy who said, America is back. Back to what exactly? Destabilizing countries or abandoning allies? Because Joe Biden is doing both. He has a new catchphrase going around. The buck stops with me, he says. Sounds great, except that he doesn't mean it. Biden blames Donald Trump for signing a deal with the Taliban, which is fair enough. He did sign that deal. But if he did not agree with the deal, why didn't Biden walk away from it? He has reversed almost every Trump-era policy, so why not this one? No answers. The president also blames the Afghan leaders and the army. He basically called them deserters and cowards. Clearly, the buck does not stop with Joe Biden. He is the one passing it around. And this is just one instance. Joe Biden's foreign policy is like a board game with no instructions. The American media laps it up. But those policies have real-world consequences, like what we are seeing in Afghanistan. Biden was completely disconnected from the reality. Let me give you examples.
I'll start with the 8th of July 2021. Last month, Biden was asked whether he trusted the Taliban. And here's how he responded, I'm quoting, "Do I trust the Taliban? No. But I trust the capacity of the Afghan military, who is better trained, better equipped, and more competent in terms of conducting war." This was Joe Biden on the 8th of July. He said that he completely trusted the capacity of the Afghan military. Cut to the 16th of August. His tone changed completely. Here's what he said, and I'm quoting again. "Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometimes without trying to fight." Who is lying here, the Biden of July 2021 or the Biden of August 2021? The fact is, Joe Biden oversold the Afghan military. Why? So that he could get his troops out without fuss. This is not intelligence failure, it's more of a cover-up. Same with the evacuation process. Here's what Biden said on the 14th of April. Quoting again, "It's time for American troops to come home. We'll do it responsibly, deliberately, and safely." Well, things played out exactly the opposite. American planes were taking off with Afghans stuck on the landing gear. So what does Joe Biden do? Another U-turn. He now says that chaos was inevitable.
The idea that somehow there's a way to have gotten out without chaos ensuing, I don't know how that happens. I don't know how that happened.
Again, which Biden is lying? The president got almost everything wrong on Afghanistan. He said a Taliban takeover was not inevitable. Kabul fell over a weekend. He said Al-Qaeda and ISIS have been driven out of Afghanistan. What does the Pentagon say? Both groups, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, continue to maintain a presence. And now the big lie. Nation building was never America's objective. Let me introduce you to a 59-year-old U.S. Senator from Delaware, a much younger Joe Biden from 2002. That Joe Biden seemed to be in love with the idea of nation building.
History is going to judge us very harshly, I believe, if we allow the hope of a liberated Afghanistan to evaporate because we are fearful of the phrase nation building or we do not stay the course.
Apparently, a lot can change in 19 years, including ideology, principles, and commitments. We call it political convenience. For months, Joe Biden talked up the Afghan army. He dismissed the threat of a Taliban takeover. Those were all lies. If the buck does stop with him, then Joe Biden must apologize for this debacle. The so-called empathizer-in-chief must answer for the refugee crisis, but he won't. Because this is not Joe Biden's first mistake. For all the talk about his foreign policy chops, Biden's actual record is a disaster. He had 12 years in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, 8 years as Vice President of the U.S., yet most times he was on the wrong side of history. 1975, Biden opposed giving aid to the South Vietnamese government. America lost that war. 1991, Joe Biden opposed the Gulf War. He was wrong again. It proved to be one of America's greatest military successes. 2003, Joe Biden supported George Bush's Iraq War. We all know how that turned out. 2011, Biden convinced Barack Obama to withdraw troops from Iraq. It was a spectacular failure. Iraq descended into civil war, Iranian proxies poured in, and ISIS began its ruthless expansion in the region. That is Joe Biden's resume. A long list of epic mistakes, enough to get a State Department staffer fired, but Biden gets bumped up to president. It's a classic case of putting experience over wisdom. And they're two completely different things. Biden has tons of experience, but wisdom, as it turned out, not so much. I'll end with what a former Obama and Bush aide wrote about Joe Biden in his book, and I'm quoting. He's been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. And he's right. And now that Biden is president, it's not just America's problem. It's a problem for the whole world. Now let's talk about the biggest Panjshir Valley. It's located in Kabul, the biggest province of Afghanistan, and the only one. The group has surrounded the valley. They've issued threats, deadlines. But Panjshir Valley has refused to surrender. Holding fort are some of Pakistan's most courageous young men. They're doing what troops from 36 countries could not do. The people of Panjshir are taking the Taliban head-on. Here's a report.
Take a close look at these young men. Many of them look fresh out of their teens. What they are doing is something 130,000 troops from 36 countries could not do. These young men are standing their ground and fighting terror. This photo was clicked in the Panjshir Valley. It is the smallest province of Afghanistan and the only one to not have fallen to the Taliban. This valley is 113 kilometers north of Kabul. It is guarded by the Hindu Kush mountains and defended by strong and courageous Afghans. The Taliban have surrounded Panjshir from the outside. Inside it, an anti-Taliban force is ready to fight till the end. Guerrilla leaders have gathered from around the country. They are training to take on the Taliban. Also in Panjshir are government officers and some personnel from the special forces. They have retreated from their posts and have joined the anti-Taliban force in the valley. These personnel have brought along with them hundreds of Humvees, armored cars and helicopters. The post Vice President Amrullah Saleh is in Panjshir too. There are terrains to be avoided, he tweeted some 24 hours ago. Panjshir is Afghanistan's bastion of resistance. In fact, it has always been one. In the 19th century, for example, when the British Empire tried to conquer Afghanistan, Panjshir remained untouched. The Soviets, too, had a hard time conquering the valley in the 1980s. On the 23rd of August, the Taliban had given the Panjshir Valley 4 hours to surrender. The Talib in this video had a message for the anti-Taliban force. If they surrender, then good. If not, then they will be punished. Anti-Taliban leader Ahmad Massoud says surrender is not in his vocabulary.
I am in my sanctuary, I am in my stronghold, Panjshir Valley.
He is the son of Ahmad Shah Massoud, who was one of the most prominent leaders of anti-Soviet resistance. He was also a popular anti-Taliban face. Ahmad Shah Massoud was assassinated just 2 days before the 9/11 attacks. 20 years later, his son has become the face of the anti-Taliban force. He is leading what is being called Resistance 2.0. Ahmed and his men are defending Afghanistan's sovereignty after a certain superpower slipped away in the shadows of the night.
What we are standing for right now, it's for the whole country. It's for sovereignty, it's for peace, it's for people, it's for inclusivity and tolerance and acceptance and moderation.
Ahmed lists out those responsible for the chaos in his country.
After a very bad and sickening peace deal struck between Americans and the Taliban, and that was the foundation for the mess that we are at. And Mr. Khalilzad single-handedly created this mess, and he is responsible, and he should answer to humanity and to Afghans and to everyone.
The Taliban outnumber the resistance force. They also have more weaponry. But what Ahmed and his men have is the sincere will to defend their motherland. And this may just be the game changer that Afghanistan needs. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Here's something interesting that happened during the Taliban press conference earlier this evening. The cameras were repeatedly turned towards women journalists who were attending the press conference. The focus clearly was on the Taliban's mistreatment of women. Not too long into the press conference, the Taliban spokesperson addressed the issue. He said women are being asked to stay at home because Talibs are supposedly not trained to deal with women. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but here's what does. The Taliban are affected by the roar of #SaveAfghanWomen. The terror group is now trying to save face after all the bad press. They want the world to believe that Afghan women will be able to return to work, they will get salaries and they'll be safe. None of it is certain, though. It's all in the future. It's unreliable. And given the Taliban's oppressive past and record, as things stand now, they've forced women to go into hiding. It's hard to believe what they say. Afghan women are disappearing from public view. They're being turned away from their workplaces. They're being forced to quit their jobs. We've been telling you all of this, and guess what? Rights groups are not helping either. Reuters reports that some rights and aid organizations are removing pictures of female staff and beneficiaries from their websites. UN Women is one of these organizations. It was supposed to fight for Afghan women. It seems to be abandoning them. Mohammad Nasiri is the United Nations Women's Director for Asia and the Pacific. And he told Reuters that the removal of these photos was a precautionary move. Erasing women from public eye, we believe, will only bolster the Taliban's ideology. It will also erase 20 years of progress. Rights groups are supposed to know this. It seems they're taking the easy way out. Reuters reports that Oxfam too is removing content related to Afghan women. These are organizations supposed to be working towards ending injustice. At this point, they're only adding to it. The Taliban are assaulting women's rights, and the rights groups are failing to save them. So who will? Who will help the women of Afghanistan? Well, all of us can. Gravitas has been relentlessly campaigning to #SaveAfghanWomen, and we've been writing about it, talking about it every day, and we'll continue to do so till each of the 14 million Afghan women are safe in their homes, in their country. Right now, they're not. Let me tell you what is happening to the women of Afghanistan. The Taliban are burning them alive. Why? For supposedly cooking bad food. I'm not making this up. This is happening. A former judge from Afghanistan told the media that women are also being shipped into neighboring countries in coffins. Again, why? To be used as sex slaves. Young girls are being forced to marry the Taliban. Reports say women are being shot for not wearing a burqa. All of this is happening in 2021. And what, may I ask, is the world doing about it? Offering lip service, hoping for the Taliban to miraculously reform overnight. Here's an example.
A fundamental red line will be the Taliban's treatment of women and girls and respect for their rights to liberty, freedom of movement, education, self-expression and employment, guided by international human rights norms. In particular, ensuring access to quality secondary education for girls will be an essential indicator of commitment to human rights.
Speaking of indicators, the current indicators only point towards assault of women's rights. This is Zaria Ghaffari. She arrived in Germany from Afghanistan some 24 hours ago. She was forced to leave her country because if she did not, had she not, the Taliban would have killed her. Why? Because Zaria is a vocal advocate of women's rights. She became the mayor of an Afghan town at the young age of 26. The Taliban do not like women in government, even though they say that under them there will be women in government. Women achievers feel that they are in danger. This group of girls is aged 15 to 18. They were all born after the start of the 2001 Afghan war. These girls received an education, made some groundbreaking inventions like low-cost ventilators made of car parts, landmine detectors. They're all Afghan girls. And they had to flee their country to finish their education and to safeguard their future.
Came from Afghanistan. It was a miserable circumstance for us, and we left our family. I'm so sorry.
No, take your time.
And it was so hard for us because our family there and our country destroyed.
We really thought that we have to go because we didn't have any other choice, because serving our country is just by getting educated.
Can you imagine what their life is like? This is the reality of the Taliban. There is no place for women in the regime so far. There is no place for human rights. Here's what Afghanistan's deposed Vice President Amarullah Saleh posted earlier today. He says the Talibs are abducting children, using them as human shields. The Taliban can paint a rosy picture of the future. They can promise safety, they can promise equality for women. But that does not change the reality. Afghan women are being forced to flee their country. They're being forced to go into hiding in Afghanistan. How does the Taliban plan to save women from this terror? What are world leaders planning to do about it? What are rights groups doing to save Afghan women? No matter which part of the world you're watching us from tonight, you can make a difference. I say this every night and I'll say it again. Be the voice of the Afghan women. Tell their stories, share their pictures, their stories, force governments to act. Join the Gravitas campaign. Use the hashtag #SaveAfghanWomen. And while we're talking about the US president and his blunders, it's worth looking at how his predecessor is doing. Do you ever wonder what happened to that wall that Donald Trump promised to build? It's in a state of disrepair, incomplete, abandoned. In fact, such is the scale of neglect that in Arizona, heavy rains have washed away entire floodgates of the wall. As it struggles to stay intact, there's another wall that Donald Trump helped build, which is getting stronger by the day, a wall of ideological and political differences that is triggering violence in America every now and then. Here's a report.
He promised a big, beautiful wall along America's border with Mexico.
We will build a great wall along the southern border.
He also promised to make Mexico pay for the wall 100%.
Mexico will pay for the wall. 100%.
What happened to this promise? It did not hold water, and it seems neither did the wall. This video is from Arizona. What you see are floodgates at Trump's border wall. They've been blown off their hinges due to heavy rain, sending huge chunks of metal fences down the stream. At least 6 such gates were washed out in Arizona. Other sections of the wall have also been severely damaged across the southern border. Their condition is in stark contrast to what Donald Trump had promised, or rather bragged about.
I would build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me, believe me.
Perhaps the president was referring to another kind of wall. This, a concrete wall of differences between Americans, which shows no signs of getting washed away. On Sunday evening, a group of far-right Americans clashed with a group of far-left Americans in the state of Portland. The opposing sides were called Proud Boys and Antifa. They engaged in gunfire following separate demonstrations in Oregon. The demonstrations were being held at the same time and mostly at the same places. How could they not descend into violence?
I know days from now I might be arrested. But I'll tell you this, I'm sick and tired. And if we have to die to defend ourselves, our families, freedom in America, we're gonna do it. We're gonna lay our lives down for what is right, for what is true. Proud boys and patriots will be out here if the cops won't do it.
No one was injured or killed in the violence. But the very sight of armed Americans clashing on the streets tells you how polarized the American society has become, where groups with different political ideations or affiliations don't think twice before picking up arms against each other. To blame Donald Trump for this state of affairs won't be a fair thing to do, because things have become so crazy that even Trump gets chastised for making the slightest of diversions in the narrative he built. At a recent rally in Alabama, he was booed by the crowd for advising them to take the vaccine.
And then we developed a vaccine, 3 vaccines in 3 months, in 9 months. And actually, I'll tell you, it was 3 days less than 9 months. And it's great. And you know what? I believe totally in your freedoms. I do. You got to do what you have to do. But I recommend take the vaccines. I did it. It's good. Take the vaccines. But you got, no, that's okay. That's all right. You got your freedoms. But I happen to take the vaccine.
This is Donald Trump's legacy. He promised to build a wall to stop immigrants, but only ended up reinforcing the fault lines that separate Blue America from Red America. And every time these fault lines overlap, Trump himself has a hard time traversing them. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Another strongman is planning his political future. The Philippines will pick its next president in 2022, and Rodrigo Duterte wants to become vice president next time. Why the demotion? Well, Duterte can only serve as president once. The constitution bars him from seeking another term. So he found a backdoor to remain in office. For him, the next election is not just about keeping power. He also wants to become vice president because he wants immunity from lawsuits that he will most likely face. Here's a report.
Many had hoped that Rodrigo Duterte will leave the presidency quietly next year. He can't serve beyond a single 6-year term, but Duterte has found a backdoor to stay in power. He will contest the next election as the vice presidential nominee of his party. Just like Vladimir Putin, Duterte has roped in a loyalist to replace him. Senator Christopher Bong Go has been named the presidential candidate. Go has been one of the closest aides of Duterte since the late 1990s, when Duterte served as a congressman and represented the Davao city. In 2019, Duterte's endorsement helped Go become a senator, but even after winning the election, Go didn't stop serving as a personal aide to the Philippine president. Duterte's moves are consistent with the tactics of strongmen. But there is another reason why he wants to stay in power: immunity. In July this year, Duterte told the members of his party that staying on as vice president will protect him from any criminal prosecution. Why does he fear prosecution? Because he waged a brutal war on drugs. Duterte could be tried for crimes against humanity by the International Criminal Court. The chief prosecutor of the court has called for a probe against Duterte. He says that thousands of Filipinos have died in the president's war on drugs, and many of these killings were extrajudicial. Duterte's own statements don't help his case. He had once vowed to kill 3 million drug addicts in the Philippines.
Hitler massacred 3 million Jews. Now, there's a 3 million drug addicts. There are. I'd be happy to slaughter them. At least if Germany had Hitler, the Philippines would have. But, my victims, I would like to be all criminals to finish the problem of my country and save the next generation from perdition.
Those words could come back to haunt him. So he wants the safety net of a vice presidency. But legal experts don't think it's a foolproof plan. They argue that the vice president is not immune from any such charges, and they don't rule out the possibility of lawsuits, even if Duterte returns to power. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
Пане президенте України!
Сторіччя. Василенку.
Посмертно.
Пані та панове, на майдані подвиги бійців.